Humorously enough, I've written everything out for this video except for an intro, but in this video I'm going to just be talking. Yeah, that's pretty much the end of the sentence. I'm going to be talking a lot, working through my thoughts, something I've been doing while actively writing the script that you can see reflected in my glasses, that I will be reading practically verbatim. I will be referring to an ex-friendship. That's what this video is about. Specific pinpointed aspects of this friendship with this person, Niahlese. I'm not using their real name because why the fuck would I do that? And when I look over here, it's me reading, which I will be doing the entire time. I just want to start with a disclaimer. There are aspects of Niahlese and my friendship and experiences together I will not share out of respect for her family, my family, and uncomfortable aspects of our shared and individual experiences. I want it to be known that she is not a villain, and I do not view her as such. She is a beautifully complex being like any other person, and since I don't have her permission to make this video, I did not ask. I want to respect at least a semblance of her dignity and her privacy. Some of the situations that impacted people aside from us I won't be sharing, as well as situations that impacted us both strongly but are beyond worth airing out on the internet, are going to be stayed locked away and for private conversations only. And with that being said, some of the things I am actively choosing to leave out will also be leaving out some pertinent context, but mine and her and others' privacy and security is obviously going to weigh more than exact details. I'm using this video as a way to vent my thoughts, to be honest. Try and make a map of them. Look to see how our friendship went wrong from her side and my side as best as I can while doing this alone. Obviously, I'm biased by my own pain and hurt from this experience and likely will convey that, but understand that she is not an evil person, nor do I want to pin her that way. Blood or not, friends or not, she is and always will be someone I loved and cared for. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get into the nitty gritty. No, I'm just kidding. First, I wanted to start off, music is so casually weaved into so much of my channel. I wanted to think about songs that I dedicate to her or to our situation in general. The first one is Younger by Rule. This was just my go-to friendship breakup song after my first major friendship breakup. This is my sad song, sad reminiscent song. We have You Are My Enemy by Hobson. Specifically the second verse, taking out the lines where he's like wishing ill and bitter death on somebody. I would not sing that line, I'll be honest. Just the anger of the song helped me with my anger through the situation. We had two moments that solidified friendship breakups. One that I terminated and the second that Niahlese ended. Younger and You're My Enemy were definitely my perspective from that first when I was sad and angry, or I don't want to be your friend anymore. More towards this most recent one, we have Disgusted by Aolani, who knows, UGOMDN by Chloe the God. Both of these songs are breakup songs, but in my reflection of a relationship and the toxic aspects of it, it was really resemblance of a relationship, because bar for bar in all these songs were hitting. And I think it's also fair to say that a song that I think that she would dedicate to me, I don't know if she actually knows the song, but Not a Friend by Sorn. I feel like my understanding of her and how she might be feeling or might have felt throughout our friendship would be best conveyed by this song. First and foremost, our friendship itself was a beautiful thing. I know that contradicts the point of this video, and I'm going to speak on where it went wrong, but please know our friendship was a beautiful thing. I'm talking full of cliches and inside jokes. We could have been any teen's Pinterest vision board for friendship. She is my sister. I will say that to this day. I'll probably say this for the rest of my life. Not in a biological sense, but a spiritual one. We fought and argued like siblings. We were unfathomably comfortable with each other. She made me believe in platonic soulmates. We would sit in the bathroom talking, switching who showered, just hanging out, just being in the same space constantly. We wore coordinated outfits, we shared clothes, we spent the night for weeks at a time, we shared secrets and giggled and cried together. I developed close and individual relationships with her family. She was an extension of me. She is kin. And I think it's important to preface this video with the fact that we had a friendship that lasted a long time, that was a good thing, that was a beautiful thing, even though I'm going to go into depths of all the things that were bad about it. Okay, had slight technical difficulties. Now moving into some more of the general themes of error that occurred throughout our friendship. These are issues I attest for contributing to and am taking some responsibility for. Through ages 13 or 14, which is when we met, until 17, these were our primary issues. We were young and in adolescence, struggling with our mental health before fully learning the importance of boundaries and how to enforce them. We didn't understand how to build and enforce healthy relationships with ourselves, and that bled into the way that we interacted in our friendships. And we were around each other the most, so it impacted our friendship heavily. One of the major things, which is codependency and enabling. We are around each other a lot. We relied on each other for a lot of different things. We were friends that sat in misery together. I've talked about this in my video with Ms. Gone. We didn't intentionally sit in misery, but we were both going through a lot and shared with each other heavy burdens, taking on the weight of each other's problems, and then using our knowledge of each other's problems as excuses for one another's toxic behaviors. And this enabled or excused our toxic behavior because we were aware of them, but not in the process of actively fixing them. Our empathy towards each other and our understanding of our situations could enable part of these toxic behaviors. We also had a lot of issues with hierarchy, and that best friend slot meant a lot and held very specific expectations, and there was a lot of jealousy that stemmed from the lack of validation that I'll get into more deeply. Mainly, our most prominent issue was issues with communication. When one of us was upset, we grew distant. We also had a lot of differences in communication styles, needs, and valued, and this continued throughout the entirety of our friendship. We had drastic differences in perspectives, differences in intentions, and just how we view the world. I don't know if you know the 16 Personalities MBTI test that's loosely based off of Myers-Briggs, but all the memes about T versus I's, thinking versus feeling friendships were evidence in petty arguments that we had throughout our friendships. Just to paraphrase our difference in how we think. Honestly though, we fought a lot. We were both young kids fighting for love we already had for each other that we never believed was there from the other person. This stemmed from our heavy insecurities and anxieties and manifested in how we interacted in friendships. Our lack of love for ourselves lessened our ability to accept the love from someone else, specifically the someone we allowed to see in our most vulnerable states, which was each other. But most things, heavy on the most but not all, but most things from these ages are just us learning ourselves and each other in a really raw way. So there's room for error, there's room for growth, and room for not toxic behavior, but we were young, we didn't know any better. There's room for us to learn. We were doing that in such a raw way, and it was literally like siblings. A major takeaway though that came from these fights laid a poor foundation for the future of our friendship, at least from my perspective, so allow me to vent for a moment. It stems from our communication issues. Niahlese would get sad, angry, upset, or hurt by something I did or didn't do, and distance herself from me. This was how she worked to protect her mind, as was a continued practice as we got older. My thoughts in response to this was to give her space when I noticed her pulling away. I assume if someone is distancing themselves from me, they have their reasons, and I'm not going to force myself somewhere where I don't feel like I'm wanted. Most of our fights would last a couple days, and in all honesty, it usually was me initializing our peace, fighting to keep us together. I would come to her after hearing X, Y, and Z from friends, or after X amount of days, after I feel like the space was enough, or just when I got tired of the space, or was too hyper aware of the distance, and I would try to discuss the distance and see where her head was at. She'd tell me, we'd joke about how if we talked earlier, it would have been resolved, and yet the cycle repeated itself. Because of this, I took it upon myself and made her aware of it, that I was not going anywhere. I was a forever friend. I told her no matter how mad she got at me, I'm always going to be there. I wouldn't go anywhere. This was an extremely toxic and dangerous promise for me to make for myself and for her. It placed the role on me as the problem person in the relationship who had to clean up the mess because I made it. It took all accountability off of her and thus enabling a lot of her toxic behaviors. Again, I want to reiterate that it is a role I took upon myself. She didn't force it on me. I did so with the hopes of being validating to her that I cared about her and was committed to our friendship. Our communication styles and emotional needs further enforced and enabled the role, and no action was ever taken to disable it, so it continued. And it also worked, so it became the foundation of how we functioned in terms of conflict, and thus putting a heavy toll on myself as the caretaker of the relationship. It was my job to convince her I cared for her, validate her feelings, and assure her that I was going to be there, remove all doubts. Because of this, I was always jumping to conclusions, as we would say, because it became my default assumption that she was angry or upset with me, that I was doing something wrong, that I had to hunker down to work to fix something. At times, I would get defensive in arguments, but still had to leave space to comfort her to ensure our friendship was saved and was safe. It was emotionally taxing and draining, and it was the expectation. One I had wrongfully enforced and placed on myself, and she found solace in, so continued to uphold it. And the weight of these expectations, the constant reminders of my failing to meet them, in congruence with my own insecurities, had me convinced I was a horrible person. I would just feel guilty a lot of the time. I would sporadically message her these lengthy apologies, apologizing and thanking her for being my friend, apologizing for how difficult I am to be friends with, and telling her that I appreciated that she stayed. In response to these apologies, looking back, there wasn't really very much reassurance. I never got a "you are growing" or "no need to apologize" or any semblance of her understanding or respecting my humanity or my emotional integrity. It was just an "I don't know what to say" and or an "I love you." But I remind myself that emotional intelligence isn't innate and also has to be learned and molded, especially when you're a teenager. And it helps pull that perspective that reminds me that she was just a kid and was probably overwhelmed by the dramatics and weight of my words, so she didn't know how to respond. But I can't help but get hurt when reflecting, because I was just a kid too. But because of this dynamic we crafted, it wasn't ever her job to work through why she had the doubts, nor to help me to do the work to strengthen and build our relationship up beyond something that was surface level. Her being upset was never a her problem or issue for her to work to solve. It was always a me thing. It always meant I wasn't doing enough. And it was always expected that I would be the one to reach out and initiate conversations and pull her thoughts from her, trying to get her to communicate effectively. It was my job because I'd promised to stay. Like, coming to this realization was detrimental to our friendship. So now, moving out of the venting, we're going to be attempting to step into Niahlese's perspective a little bit more. Initially, I had planned to sit here and list all the specific things she did that hurt me, the issues at the forefront of my mind that I think of now, to remind myself that us not being friends is an acceptable and better decision. But I want to delve into them a bit, I think. So it's not just she did this, and this, and it sucks. But I want to try and think about why she did these things, while also addressing how I enabled them, worsened them, or could have prevented them. Delving more into the physical, literal, and directional separation of our lives, this caused the start of the major rifts in our friendship. When we were younger and figuring out the world, envisioning what our futures would look like, we were doing this together. We had plans. We'd talk about where we would travel, what we would do, where we would live, what our jobs would be, what our future apartment would look like. We spoke on building a future together. Obviously, when she moved, which happened around when we were 17, that altered our plans, acting as a major obstacle that we never really addressed. I continued my life and she continued hers, but I later learned that her expectation was for us to continue ours, for distance not to alter anything, for this change to exist only in terms of location and no other aspect of our lives. And that simply did not happen. Because of this, she became resentful of certain things. I remember specifically how she once told me that it pissed her off that I was in school and doing things we were supposed to be doing together without her. In her sharing her pain about the changes in our lives, she would often diminish or devalue what I was doing. I know now, and knew at the time, that it was less of her wanting me to fail per se, but rather struggling to communicate that my success in certain areas and moving towards certain goals without her was something that she had trouble grasping and celebrating, to be said in a way that wasn't harmful to me. Thus, it still was painful and pulled me into a space where I felt I couldn't share my wins with her. My wins were losses for us. When she was conveying these feelings, it felt belittling to me. Yet, I still had the job of comforting her and validating her feelings. So I was denying myself communicating my pain at these types of sentiments in order to fix the issues she was having. Unfair to me, but at fault of myself in the way that it is a clear demonstration of the hindrance that was my lack of communication. I think a lot of this and these types of actions and reactions that I'm going to be talking about were out of fear. Fear of losing me in our friendship. Fear displaces jealousy and my closeness to others. When she moved when we were 17 and we were living such clearly separate lives, I know that took a heavy toll on her. Niahlese has a lot of traumas and mental health issues that she battles with that exacerbate these fears, that created them. And I understand and empathize with that. It's a difficult thing to manage. But it doesn't excuse or make correct the hurt she caused me. But it definitely does a pretty good job at explaining it. I guess it's time to get into a bit more specifics. She would tell me that she was the only friend that cared about me. none of my other friends cared for me or loved me the way she did, which in her mind was true. She was saying this to keep me, to protect me, to remind me of our relationship and its strength, to help validate and ensure I wouldn't be going anywhere. I understand what her mind was thinking, but it still hurt to hear each time she said it. To have someone trying to convince you to isolate, that you have no judge of character and that no one I cared about could be trusted, that they didn't love or care about me, was painful, especially repetitively being told this for like 2 years. But trying to think more on how she was thinking, my friendship with these people was an act of betrayal for her. I was choosing them over her in her mind. That is her perspective because of her view on the world. She sees things from this victimized lens as an effect of her trauma and battles with mental health and life experiences that she still actively struggles to heal from and work through. This victim mindset helps her avoid the painful job of holding herself accountable. It helps validate her pains, strengthens them, and builds more walls. These walls feel like security for her when I would view them more as a prison. In doing so, I become her villain. Every call I missed while being around other people was dropping her down my leaderboard and removing herself from that priority that she had grown accustomed to. When I would post on social media without checking in, she took this as my not caring for her. And she told this to me. She would speak in length on and off from when we were 17 to 19 about how bad of a friend I was because she felt I didn't put enough effort in. And she would say, if I couldn't give her 5 minutes of my time, she wasn't going to give me any. That was a recurrent argument. And it's my understanding that my hurt and pain at the idea of losing her was a comfort to her. Proof that I cared for her and wanted to maintain the friendship. Proof she needed because I lacked in the ability to meet her communicative needs. So she used these arguments, this anger at me, to fuel our friendship. To remind herself it existed because however else we spoke was not validating enough. And she continued to do it because I continued to fail to meet the emotional needs of hers. And she is valid for advocating these needs openly and getting upset at me not meeting them, but still considering myself a friend to her. Initially, I would apologize while trying to explain my perspective. I'm busy, I'm going through X, Y, and Z. I try putting effort in through this, that, and the third. And these things she took as mere excuses. You can message me once a year and we meet up and I'll be just fine knowing you love me from afar. In contrast, she was someone who needed a lot of reassurance. My working to cater that wasn't enough. In my head, we have a Snapchat streak. That's how we check in every day. We call at least once a week, usually more though, that's plenty. But my inability to answer every phone call was painful for her. She was lonely or not in the place she wanted to be and felt I wasn't able to always be there when she needed me, and thus breaking my promise to her. As this continued, I did invalidate her feelings often. I would deny that I'm being a bad friend and explain the efforts I put in and explain how I cared for her. I grew more angry because I felt myself making time for her in contrast to what she was feeling. I was answering calls whenever I saw them, even out with friends or in class or at dinner. But for her, calls every couple days or weeks wasn't enough. A handful of texts throughout the day and occasional phone call didn't negate what she expected of a check-in or conversation. So I wasn't meeting the friendship need or expectation for her. Although partly I think it's the priority and hierarchy issue at play, as well as just a simple difference between us and our expectations. She expected me to have her at the top of my list in so many aspects of my day. She probably felt I was slipping away from her. She saw me posting with other people or not answering because I would be doing something with other people. I'm sure it all felt like a betrayal for her. I think she found security, safety, in the image she had of me, and it was immortalizing to me from when I was 14 to 17. In this recent conversation, with her initializing our parting, one of the things she said was, I don't understand the person you've become. You are definitely not the same Aolani I knew and loved, and you haven't been for a very long time. Which is most definitely true, at least to an extent. I hold the same values, but go about life through a different lens. I have grown, and with that has come change, and change is a difficult thing to grasp, and even harder to accept. And the change paired with the literal distance we had between us takes a heavy toll, and it leaves more room for misunderstanding and miscommunication, which was already heavily prevalent throughout our entire friendship. Any shift in priority or decrease in communication was a reflection of the separation of our lives and differences in our experiences. A main issue in our friendship is that there should be flexibility in relationships because change is inevitable. I could accept this, expected it, but for her it was a loss of security, removal of a safety net, and that makes it a betrayal for her, a painful experience for her. And while I understand that this is a battle she must fight herself, as it happens, our friendship was collateral, so I reaped some of the repercussions. I should have communicated my needs better. I should have been more introspective in allowing myself to learn my needs and my issues and how we interacted way earlier in our friendship to salvage it, before it took such a painful toll that leaves such a poor taste in my mouth now when I reflect on it. I shouldn't have waited to have open conversations about my perspective before it blew up, before I blew up on her. And I did. Do I regret the things I said? No. Do I regret the way I said them? A bit. The blow-up happened in our falling out when we were 19. I poured out all my feelings in a lengthy message. In all honesty, I don't regret allowing myself to feel all I was feeling and expel that to her. It helped me get a weight off my chest that I was carrying. It wasn't fair of me to burden her with it the way I did, though. I mainly wish I had the courage and comfort and trust to voice my issues earlier and as they were happening, just to help my conscience, because in reality, she wasn't and isn't in the mindset to hear and address certain toxic things about herself, especially not rattled off one thing after another as I blatantly invalidated the feelings she was sharing with me. It was definitely an immature approach. It was also likely a major shock for me to switch up in what to her seems like overnight with a 5-page essay about why she's wrong for being hurt because I was hurting more secretly. Generally, it wasn't fair in our friendship because she pointed out my habits over the years. I was constantly made self-aware and had to put in work to understand why my behaviors were wrong, and I was allowed to grow to become a better friend. I did her a disservice by not doing the same. The way she did these things, pointed out her issues, were flawed and often toxic. It allowed me perspective to see myself as an individual outside myself. To validate my own feelings and experiences, I think it's important that I acknowledge that I was frequently apologizing for things that were often coming from her insecurities that I had to make up for, but I want to note that enabling her in this way by not being open hindered her growth and some earlier chances at introspection, as well as faulted our ability to effectively communicate, to work to better our friendship for the both of us. For concluding remarks, in reading and rereading the most recent message to me that she sent, there are a couple conclusions I'm able to draw, as well as in reflecting just on our friendship as a whole. It's painful to realize that she never cared about me. She just cared about how I cared for her. And when I stopped measuring up to her expectations and ideals, I was thrown away without a second glance. I never received an apology. I never will receive one. I'll never get closure. And I was something for her and not something to her. She is my sister, but I am not hers. I understand that the feeling isn't mutual, and that is a painful thing to admit, even harder to accept. But as we each would share our stories quite differently, if she were to recreate this exact video from her perspective, it would be completely different, I'm sure. But this would be one of the most drastic contradictions today and the foundation of our similarity in the past. She is my sister, and I was hers. I think that's all I have to say. I know that a lot of it was just me reading verbatim from this page, so it's probably going to be a little awkward with my talking. The flow's not going to be as nice and fluid because I'm reading, but if I just rambled, it wasn't going to make sense, and I couldn't bullet point things because I didn't want to go off on super long tangents or speak on things that I wasn't comfortable with sharing and have to be super attentive when editing to make sure that I don't violate her privacy or dignity or those kinds of things, and try and keep my sense of integrity while I tell this. So it was just easier for me to read. Probably have other videos like that when I have more longer length videos where I'm not just talking just to talk and I have the goal of speaking about one specific topic. I'll have more scripts. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. But if you didn't, that's fine. I know I say this about all my videos, but this video truly was for me. It really was just to help me in my thinking and my sorting my thoughts out, and didn't allow too many of the negative, sad, and angry feelings to take over, because I did that the first time. However many years ago that was. Oh my gosh, that's 4.5 years ago. So obviously things are changed when I think about things differently, but I also want to hold myself accountable in the ways that I can, while also trying so hard not to discredit all the pain that I felt throughout this friendship. But I do love and care for her and wish her the best, just like I wish the best for you. Wishing you the strength you need to continue and just make it through the day. And I hope you work to find the strength every day. Bless. I don't know why, but the camera keeps disconnecting. I don't know if it's a sign for me to not make this video. What the fuck?